Now, when it comes to, now we'll talk a bit about the structure of the test. So as you know, the very basics, of course, you have 4 sections, or broadly speaking, 4 sections. You have the listening, the very first section, you have the reading section, you have the writing, and then you have the speaking section. Of course, the first 3 sections are part of the main test that we usually book. So let's say you're booking one on the 26th of June, you're booking one on the 10th of December, you're booking the main test, right? And the speaking test date is usually provided to you, or it's like given by the institute. So we don't have any control as such over the speaking test date. So if you're more inclined towards saying, oh yeah, I have school, or I have classes going on, I have college, or I have university, I would try to avoid weekdays, you might do that for the main test, but for the speaking you might just have to adjust. And it could be on the same day though, of course in a different slot, but it could be on a separate day before or after your main test. So, or the main test day basically. So basically this is what it looks like. And the time division, kindly note the time division. So in the first one we've written 30 to 40 minutes. Now why is that? So listening, the first section has some difference in the 2 modes of tests. So we have the computer delivered, as we have mentioned previously, and we have the pen and paper based, right? Now in the pen and paper based test, once you're done jotting down those details for your listening questions, you get a whopping 10 minutes to transfer your answers, right? Now that is not available in the computer-based mode. So for that you just get like barely 2 minutes, and you just pretty much do it simultaneously. So that's like the usual difference, which is why we've said approximately 30-ish minutes to 40 minutes, depending on which mode of test you're going for. And of course then comes reading. It's a long section. Now see, as you can see, the whole duration of the test, the duration is something which we have to be mindful of. Why is this? Mostly students, like when they're practicing, and I keep on repeating to students all the time that practice, and like when you're doing the tests, try to sit through the test, do not entertain any diversions, do not be distracted, right? As teachers we keep on saying that, right? But the thing is that often students break down their practice, which is fine for the initial phase of practice and preparation, but not so great when you're trying to really prepare finally for the whole thing, because you have to have the patience to go through these long sections without losing your focus. So when practicing, you have to try to emulate the kind of the patience that you would be requiring, the length of time, the exact length of time, by the way, that you would be getting, so that you can practice the questions correctly and focus on time management, as well as sort of prepare your mind to sit through it all, not losing the patience or not being distracted. So that's part of your success mantra as well, right? You have to stay focused throughout the test. Now, when it comes to the overall, like the structure in terms of the questions, how many questions do you have? As you can see, so it's like 40 questions in listening, 40 questions in the reading part, so 40 questions each in those, right? Quite a few questions. They might seem as quite a few questions, but frankly, they're just like very few, because when you deal with fill in the blanks, they're not really like big questions. Big questions are only like MCQs as such. Otherwise, they're just like fill in the blanks, matchings, true, false, can't tells, and that's it. So 40 questions, plenty of time, I would say. Plenty of time, especially in reading. And 40 minutes or 30 to 40 minutes, as we discussed, for listening, and a whopping 60 minutes, as we discussed, for reading. So each passage, basically 3 passages, you would be having 20 minutes, right? Then again, for writing, you have these 2 tasks and all, and basically this is how the whole thing looks. So we'll just go a bit more in detail to talk sectionally about what we're talking about, these sections, right? Now, listening. So I would say in terms of difficulty, it is sometimes like students have this complaint, you can say sort of an objection that listening is so difficult, we have to keep track of what they're saying, we have to keep jotting it down, we have to answer our questions. But then you guys, especially you guys are part of this whole digital generation, you guys keep on doing so many things at the same time. You do listen to stuff, you do other stuff like jotting things down, doing things, writing, speaking at the same time. So we are used to doing the very basic functions. Now, why are we usually flabbergasted when it hits us as a test? Is because we're not used to the test structure. It's an artificial structure, of course, and we're not used to this whole mindfulness of, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be minding the question, I'm supposed to be understanding what I'm supposed to look for when the audio plays, and I'm supposed to pick exactly that information and jot it down, or like type it, or simply like give it there, right? So that we can I can basically do it. So it usually is a little difficult that way because we're not accustomed. Any test is an artificial structure, so we just have to get used to it. That's the whole deal, right? And when it comes to listening, again, we have these 4 subsections, or these 4 audios which are played, right? And the first audio always has everyday scenarios, like very general scenarios. Could be like booking a banquet hall, could be just a random conversation on going for a picnic, could be something very general, right, among usually 2 people. And when it comes to the second audio, it's again some sort of speech, could be presentation, could be directional, could have maps and all. So, but then mostly the first 2 audios are more general. You have 10 questions each from each audio. And then when it comes to the third and the fourth audios, they are a bit more specialized, we can say. So they're more academic. You can have lectures, presentations on like scientific things, like maybe ocean biodiversity or something like that. You can have maybe like a conversation between 2 students who are trying to figure out how they would be doing a project, or how they would be approaching a project, and so on and so forth. So we can have like a distinction. So 2 of them more general, 2 of them more specialized, but nothing that a student is not acquainted with. So again, it's usually a matter of exposure. So basically, it's nothing that we're not acquainted with. It's just a matter of practice. If we practice correctly and we know exactly the approach, the correct approach, which we have to use in order to practice and prepare, then there's no way things can go wrong, right? So we would now move on to understanding the reading one, the reading section. So the reading section, as we have already discussed, it has these 3 passages, right? And well, in terms of the manual test and the computer-based test, there's not much difference in the reading as such, only broadly speaking that you're reading on screen versus you're reading on paper. And most of you guys are so used to reading on screen all the time, right? So it's again something you have to decide for yourself. If it's something that, okay, no, I'm strictly a person who is more comfortable in reading manually, and I'll be fine in that way, then okay, fine, go on with that. But again, if you're like, okay, no, I'm comfortable either way, then you should really focus on the screen-based approach, because overall digital test has some benefits actually, especially when we're going to be discussing writing. Right after this, we'll discuss that. Now, in the reading, you have these 3 broad passages, like quite long, right? Quite a few paragraphs. And the best thing is actually that you have paragraphs, right? So there's always there's exactly a methodical approach in which you can make this section easy peasy, right? You can get at least an 8. So what do you need to get an 8, by the way? So out of 40, let's say out of 40 questions, if you are correctly answering 39 questions or 40 questions, 40 out of 40 or 39 out of 40, you get a 9 out of 9. It's a perfect score, right? Then a near perfect score would be a 37 and a 38. So either 37 questions correct or 38 questions correct. Either way, you get an 8.5. And just below that, 35 or 36. So either 35 questions correct or 36 questions correct, you would get an 8, a great score, an 8 out of 9. So we absolutely have to target an 8.5, aim higher, always aim higher, right? So 8.5 or 8, we're absolutely trying to get you an 8, no less. Why should we settle for any less, right? So the reading is a section which can be managed methodically. Now, the usual complaint with the section is that the time is something that people have trouble with, that they sometimes say that, oh, the time has run out and so on. But that's usually because students get stuck pondering on a question. They got stuck with a question or a part of the passage, they're not being able to find the answer, or maybe they're reading it again and again. So in order to address these issues, we have to fundamentally address your reading pattern first. So in our reading audio, like reading videos, the reading section, comprehensive videos that we are going to present to you, you would find the exact ways that you're going to be addressing your reading and your comprehension. So if you know exactly how to do it and practice, of course, afterwards, it gets so much easier than practicing just blindly, right? So again, this whole thing about competency or proficiency versus performance. If you're making just slips or silly errors, that's fine. You can like take care of it, be mindful and all. But if you don't know exactly how to do it, that's a trouble, right? So we're going to be discussing all of the ways that you can enhance that skill so that it really becomes easier for you in the long run to just answer the questions and the answers would just readily pop up to you, right? Now, moving on to the writing section. Now, the writing section is probably the most infamous one out of the whole 4 sections, the overall sections. This is because students, especially from Indian boards and students, we have seen like professionals also, like mature students, they're not accustomed to writing at all. So we have gone past the days when we used to do a lot of, we used to have a lot of written communication in terms of emails or mostly like letters or personal communication with like congratulatory letters or wishes and so on. We don't really do that any longer, and it's all about just short texts and the whole internet lingo and all that, which has definitely jeopardized our ability to write even in our mother tongue. So nonetheless, writing is something, it's a skill. As we say, that's just the overall ability, right? So, so basically, it's a matter of practice, right? It's a matter of practice that you have to practice every day. If you're not comfortable writing a lot and you're getting, so you see, for writing, this happens that in the beginning, there's usually a resistance. Most of our students, they usually point out, oh, ma'am, I'm not able to, I know exactly what to write, but I'm not able to put it on the paper. Something's going wrong. Something's stopping me. It's just not happening. So it's really quite mysterious. It's just like Why is it not happening? The answer is that you are not letting it happen. That's what's happening, right? So we restrict ourselves, we limit ourselves, and we try to evade anything which is a little uncomfortable, which is a little unfamiliar, let's say, right? So if you're not used to writing, the more you would prevent yourself from engaging in writing, the more you're just pushing yourself in the puddle, and you're not going to be getting out of it unless you take the initiative. You have to write. Okay, so that's that. Now when it comes to the writing structure, we have two tasks, as you know already. We have the task 1. In academic, the task 1 happens to be a sort of a summative report of a graphical information. The graphical information could be illustrated through charts, maps, diagrams, different kinds of like flowchart thingy and all, anything pretty much, any graphical information, which could be comparative in nature, which could be descriptive in nature, but overall you're dealing with graphical information, right? And it's a really simple task. You have 20 minutes, and don't mind the minimum words, by the way. If they ask you, okay, these are the number of minimum words you have to write, we should not be really bothering ourselves with the minimum words, because we ought to write in a manner that completes the purpose. If you're writing to summarize the graphical information, you are supposed to do it completely. If you can do it within a para or 2 paras, if you need para division, if you don't need para division. By the way, there's no as such structure for the first writing task. We'll talk about that in detail in our later videos. It's a little flexible on that because it's sort of a summary, that's why. But when it comes to the task 2, we do have sort of a set structure that you have to have these paragraphs, at least around 3 or 4. 4 would be precise, or more as in like maximum 5. So it's like a very basic structure of intro, conclusion. In between you can have 2 body paras, or if you have lots to say, then maybe 3 body paras. Now, of course, in writing there's a remarkable difference when it comes to the mode of testing. So if you're going for the pen and paper one, of course the approach is a little messy, we would say. So for all those students who are absolutely not comfortable in typing, because like we always hear that, oh ma'am, I'm not really comfortable with the typing speed I have. Frankly, it's not to do with typing speed much, because if you have a very decent speed, that works absolutely fine. You don't have to be like clicking away in a matter of seconds or something like that. Nothing like that. You have plenty of time for writing. 40 minutes for the task 2, 20 minutes for the task 1. That's a whopping 1 hour, right? You have enough time if you do it in a decent pace also. But then again, it's again a matter of personal choice, and if you're like, no, I'm absolutely going to stick to the manual approach, fine, but you have to be mindful of the handwriting, and that's something we're guilty of, because many a times we just like, it doesn't have to be really beautiful or anything. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with legibility. It has to be legible. It has to be readable. Legible means it will be, anybody would be able to read it clearly, would not have to struggle to understand each of your letters, right? So it has to be really neat when you're writing manually, because that has some part to play in the examiner really becoming, losing patience over reading your piece. When it comes to the task 2, specifically, because it's a little like a longer piece, by the way, there's an advantage in the computer-based mode that, see, we all write in different manners because we conceptualize in different ways. So if you're one that, okay, I'll just type the main pointers that are just coming to my mind right now, I'll just write that first, and then I'll go to the intro, I'll flesh it out, I'll go to these points, then I'll flesh it out, and then I'll go to the conclusion. So if you're someone like that, who's who enjoys the flexibility, of the typing approach, then we always, like, I personally recommend the computer-based IELTS all the time, especially because it's like, in terms of availability, it's there every day pretty much, and it's so neat. There's nothing, it's not messy work as such. It has greater flexibility. You can start from anywhere. You don't have to start from the intro. If you want to start from the body para first, and then you want to make an intro. By the way, there are multiple different approaches to writing the essay or writing the summary report, especially the essay. Even though this is sort of the idea that, you start with the intro, that's not necessarily so. So we'll talk about that when we discuss the writing approaches and the writing methodologies. But then again, the writing section, again, is one of the key sections where people usually lose score. So this section, for this one, we have provided you with comprehensive, detailed, application-based videos where we have provided you, like, I would show you personally in real time how you're supposed to conceptualize and like transcribe that concept, pretty much like transfer that idea onto paper or type it out basically onto your screen, how you're supposed to construct that sentence, how you're supposed to construct that paragraph, right? How you're supposed to maintain that cohesion, that organic sense and the lucidity in the paragraphs, amid the paragraphs, right? One clearly flowing into the other in terms of meaning, and it's just not floating around like that, all separate, right? So we would in detail talk about the writing, and I personally always emphasize a lot on the writing skills, because the writing is a section where if you're improving in real time in your sentence construction, then it will show results also in your speaking. So they're both performance oriented sections. As I was telling you, that listening and reading, if they're like inputs, speaking and writing, they're like outputs, right? So when you have the construction in your mind and you have the correct construction, that will be reflected the moment you speak and also the moment you write. Speaking is a little more difficult when it comes to like the performance aspect, because of course you're doing it without having to think much. It is more enthusiastic. But frankly, if you just like follow our approaches, follow the exact way I'll be teaching you how to do it, how to conceptualize, how to express, you would be able to do it in no time, right? So the writing section, again, a very important section, right? We have 20 minutes and we have 40 minutes, even though not separately as such, but yeah, pretty much overall 60 minutes we have, and we have to be very mindful of the time division, right? So that we don't really mess it up. And during practice, we absolutely need to mind the time, right? Now, when it comes to speaking, the section which sort of stands alone, right? And again, a very problematic section for Indian students that we usually find. Then the speaking has generally 3 parts. So the purpose, of course, is to understand your ability or measure your ability of speech. And speech in an academic context also, because you're going for the academic module. Now, when it comes to speaking, again, we have these 3 parts, right? So what's the purpose? Like, why do they have these 3 different parts, by the way? What are they trying to get? So the first part, the conversational one, right? The conversational one, it's just like, it's a warm-up, you can say. So, of course, it's part of the whole thing, but it just like keeps you going, right? It starts with we start with a little chit chat, something about you, your favorite cuisine, your favorite dish, what you do on weekends, what you like to do, or where you like to hang out with your friends, right? Just the basic chit chat about you, your preferences and your likes and dislikes and so on, right? But when it comes to the second and the third portions, the third part is a more reflective and a more abstract one. So you have more of these whys. So why do you think students these days, or children these days, or young adults these days don't read much? So that's something they they want to get that why out of you, right? So you have to be more expressive. You have to give reflective answers. The answers would express your reflections, your thoughts on a certain issue, and they usually tackle contemporary issues, or general issues, something to do with maybe the popularity of ebooks versus physical books. It could be something like reading patterns these days among young people. It could be something like are the young people going for renting apartments, or are they buying, and so on, like what's the pattern and so on. So it could be like these general issues which are literally just everywhere around you. So be a bit mindful of all of these, right? Because anything and everything surrounding you could form the questions of your IELTS speaking, right? And when it comes to the second part, the cue card part, right, we have description. And even though people freak out all the time about this, frankly, there's no reason to, because it's just very basic description. So in journalism, for example, when we're penning an article, we have the basics of what, why, where, how, all the WHs, right? Here also, let's say they have asked you about to describe this famous business person that you know of, or that you've heard of, and or maybe that you aspire to, like whatever, basically like a celebrity of sorts or something, and you have to answer the who about it, like who the person is, of course, what kind of a business person he is, or that what, and then why he or she is like rather successful or maybe famous or whatever, and how what's your overall impression about them, and so on. So these are the usual cues that you have to follow, right? And if you are a person who's struggling with expressing your thoughts, like you're generally fine while talking to your friends, but when it comes to situations like these, you're getting stuck. It's like in your mind you're struggling, and you're talking to yourself in your mind saying, oh, I might mention this reason, but then I don't know if it's going to be good enough. So that's something which can be easily dealt with if you follow our advice, and if you practice well. But then again, if you're someone who's struggling with even expressing the basic thoughts, and definitely with sentence construction. Now here, the funny thing is, majority of the time, especially in Indian English, or in India, in the education sphere, we have this notion that in speech, grammar does not matter much. But that is a very detrimental one, because why? First, it gives you this whole lazy view that, oh, I can get away with it, it's fine, it won't matter much. It's all about just, I should have the confidence, which is absolutely true. You should have the confidence to speak, right? And you should not be minding like, oh my God, I am saying something which is wrong. I'm not supposed to speak like this. None of that. You absolutely have to speak, right? And you have to try. But then again, understanding the basic structures, understanding grammar, understanding sentence structure, this is something we cannot forego. We absolutely need the basic vocab. We need the parts of speech. We need to understand where an adverb would be useful, where we are supposed to use that adjective. Of course, you don't have to do it theoretically, but this is something we have to learn in application. So I call it practical grammar, right? It's grammar in application. So we would also talk about various of these like foundational concepts of grammar, which we apply every day, even like subconsciously. We mostly do it subconsciously. So you might not notice, but you're already applying majority of them, right? You're applying majority of them in your own tongue. You're applying majority of them when you're speaking in bilingual ways. But you are applying those very methods. You just need to be a little mindful, right? So we would also teach you, I would present you exactly the way that you're supposed to enhance the way you speak, the way you express yourself, the way you count your words, and the way you reflect on something of like a more abstract thought, right? So speaking is an essential skill, and through the IELTS preparation and preferably Edumentor support, you would be able to hone this essential skill in no time.